Are you trying to understand the eminence of real world assets and the DeFi world? Then you're welcome to Link to the Chain, a podcast brought to you by BSOS. This podcast is designed to help you understand the happenings of decentralized finance along with real world assets. I'm your host, Grusha here from BSOS, and I will be inviting my colleagues and experts from the Web3 industry to share with you their experiences and ideologies on RWA and the DeFi world. In this episode, I'm pleased to be joined by Fabrice, and I will be referring to him as Fab on his request. He's the CEO and he's the co-founder of Quadrata, and he has been in the blockchain industry for quite a few years, and long enough to let us comprehend the decentralized world from his, you can say proficient viewpoint. So I'll go directly and ask him a few questions, beginning with we would like to know what are the services that are offered by Quadrata.
Yes, thank you, Gosha, and pleasure to be here. So I think when you think about the blockchain space and Web3 space as a whole, it's still, even though, 2016 for like smart contract based blockchain, it's still something that's fairly new. And I think what has been fantastic over the last bull run, the 2020, 2021, is that it has showcased how powerful smart contract based application and decentralized applications can be. And today, if you look at kind of how the construct of how those applications work is that a user can connect the wallet and without any friction can start interacting directly with any dApps. On the opposite end, the dApps actually don't have access to any information. So that's really where Quadrata is trying to step in. We are basically recognizing that without informations, it's very, very difficult to provide more catered product, to provide advanced product, more capital efficient product to the Web3 space. And Quadrata is aiming at solving that by basically bridging and creating a notion of universal identity and representing a notion of digital compliance and reputation such that smart contract applications can now query that natively in the smart contract.
Okay, that's wonderful. Now, you just spoke about identity, right? So that talking about that we are on blockchain. So it brings us to decentralized identity, if I'm not wrong. So what do you think, like, how would you say that what is decentralized identity?
Right. I think decentralized identity has a very, very wide range of definitions. It can go from really how to just represent identity using a technology like blockchain, which is ultimately decentralized, all the way to how is identity even being defined in a fully decentralized way. As an example, if you have, all your peers or collectively a number of people who attest that you are who you are without relying on basically those centralized companies. So I think that the notion of decentralized identity really, depending on who you talk to, can really fit in that spectrum. Uh, the core premise of this is that compared to what we're accustomed to, is that you shouldn't need to share more information that you need to,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
you shouldn't have to basically re-onboard proof to every single applications that you are who you are by sharing your information with all of them. And the main concept is that you only have to do it once. And once it's done, um, you shouldn't have to basically do it again. And all those applications can have access to it in that's using blockchain technology, and that's where the decentralized aspect of it.
Okay, so the decentralized identity, it will give more ownership for the user's identity itself, like, right?
Absolutely. I think the concept is that you're able to claim your identity and you really control down the road ultimately for specific subset of attributes that are a bit more sensitive. You should have some sort of control over which applications you're willing to share with or reveal it to, and as such. And I think in the same concept, it gives you control in a sense that you are not giving up all the data to every single applications, and also that identity is still trying to preserve and enhance privacy as part of it, because we are in blockchain and because we know that blockchains blockchain technology, it's fully transparent, data privacy is even more important
Yes, absolutely.
because we don't want people to be able to see all your past history by yourself.
Yeah, I agree. Talking about decentralized identity and Quadrata, so how do you think like this is going to be useful in the lending and borrowing market in the decentralized world?
Right. So I think lending and borrowing is a very interesting example because when we look at what have emerged in 2019, 2020, 2021, we saw a bunch of those DeFi lending
Hmm.
protocols that are fully decentralized that relies on automate market making and liquidity pools. And we see really the limitations of not being able to have access to identity because right away the construct of the product has to be fully over collateralized, right? In order to be able to borrow up to $100, you need to be able to put as collateral 150, and that is because we don't
Yeah.
have access to identity and reputations and credit. Now, what could we do, in a future wave of product that we're starting to see once we unlock access to identity, once we unlock access to credit and reputation, is that now we start seeing two things very important. The first one is that we have the ability to create product that ensures that we at least not necessarily know exactly the identity of who is participating in my lending or borrowing protocols,
Hmm.
but you might have some sort of and advanced tools that can screen against bad actors. You can have some AML
Yeah.
screening, KYC screening to ensure that everyone coming into your product are not bad actors. There's no money laundering, there's no
Yeah.
terrorist
True. True.
fundings. The second aspect is that now we have access to identity, we can potentially also unlock access to reputations. Like, what is the financial reputations of someone?
Yeah, absolutely. And you brought to light the fact that decentralized identity can help us eradicate bad actors from the blockchain world. So, do you think that having a decentralized identity on the blockchain itself can prevent or, reduce the default rate that's already there? Although it's negligible, we know that. But still, do you think that it can go to even more like 0 point something and go really low? Do you think that this is something that decentralized identity will solve?
I think it's
Like reducing the default rate.
yes, it will definitely. I think that one of the purpose of really having access to digital identity and credit, I think, is two things. The first thing is, in the case of a default, you basically limit, hopefully, bad actors or people. And the second is,
Hmm.
as we bring more and more of those on-chain and off-chain credit reputations as part of a product scope and attributes to be consumed, I think it really helps kind of helps those applications detect who could be eligible for such services. And yes, the goal is to reduce as much as possible.
Yeah, that's quite informative. And I would like to tell our listeners that Quadrata uses non-transferable NFTs to represent a user's decentralized identity. And these non-transferable NFTs are actually linked to the user's wallet, and the token comprises of some very low density attributes. So in a way, Quadrata is providing passports. So you can say that it's providing you, like the users, with the citizenship for blockchain. That's incredible. And with that, Fab, you've introduced us to a very beautiful concept of omnipresent identity. So Quadrata, in a way, it's kind of accessing, or they're trying to make a more omnipresent identity for all the users. So this takes us to a very beautiful term that's called a standardization or a unified on-chain identity. Do you think it's important to have a unified identity on the chain?
I think it's important because I think if ultimately down the road there's 50 identity companies that all equivalently are dominating the market, then that still means that as a user you might have to onboard with all 50 companies and share data with all 50
50,
companies.
yes.
And I think from a point of view of an
Hmm.
applications, it becomes very difficult to consume that because you have to now integrate with not one solutions but 50 solutions.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's so exhausting integrating with so many solutions. So you standardize, or you can say a unified identity can be a very good solution to this exhaustion. And if I am to put it in a fancy way, it's like having to travel from one country to another without a visa if we all had just one passport.
Yeah, I
That
mean,
would be
the
amazing.
analogy is basically, you have a European passport. If you have a European passport today, the
Yeah,
the frictions is very it's fantastic. You can easily travel to Portugal, you gotta go to Spain, you gotta go to France, and with a single passports, you have
true.
access to all those countries, and that's what Quadrata passport is trying to become.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And Quadrata uses a non-transferable NFT, correct? So the non-transferable NFT is something that brings the security aspect onto the table, right? So like it just raised a question in my mind that is there a method through which this could be edited or modified or even deleted? Like in a way you can say that there is a tampering that can happen to this NFT because it's your identity. If there is tampering happening, then it's kind of a mm-mm.
Absolutely. I think this is a very interesting question. So let me maybe address first the deletion part of it. I think as a user,
Mhm,
our philosophy is that as a user, similarly to how you have the opt-in options to claim your passports, you should have as a user the similar equivalent to be able to opt out. So in our technology, any passport holders have the ability to burn their passports and to delete their digital identity with Quadrata without any interaction with us. They can directly go and delete their passports as long as they are the rightful
mhm.
owner. So I think that's not
Okay.
only because they should be allowed to, but also for security reasons, right? You can think of a wallet that get compromised where your private key is leaked online. You probably wouldn't want people to be able to use your wallets and pretend to be yourself in Web3. Uh,
Yeah,
but
absolutely not.
yeah, so that would be, I think, the first step. I think the second step is that
Mhm,
we're also solving for people who, for instance, lose their key. It happens all the time where you suddenly don't have
mhm,
access to your private key or your seed phrase anymore. And from that perspective, you also can go with directly to our data partners and request the right to be forgotten and deleted. And therefore,
mhm,
upon identity verifications, you have the right to also be deleted by our data partners. So that's for the deletion aspect of it. That's very, very important, ability to
mhm,
opt out. I think for the update, I think it's first of all the data that are basically being stored in our passports today are only amendable and can be only created and updated by a network of authorized data partners that work with Quadrata directly. And that is a very selective list of partners that can interact today because they are the rightful partners that can ultimately collect and verify the attributes that we support today. It's not
mhm,
an open passport that anyone can just attach data to. So that's, I think, the first step. And the second step is depending on the type of data, every data is ultimately being signed. And when it's being signed, you have an immutable trail of detecting A, who is the data partners that issue this data, and when was this
mhm.
issue. And
Okay.
most of the time, the user is basically the one that's are able to basically go through the process and themselves updating that data. But also for other reasons, the data partners have authorizations to update the data directly without the user consent and for specific attributes. And as an example, the one you can think about is, the AML risk score. When we talk about, AML activities, we want to make sure that not only the most recent AML risk score in case of changes happen is basically being updated, but also we at that point
Mhm,
probably don't want the end user in the loop, right? Because why would a end user
mhm.
who's actually committing criminal anti-money laundering willing to update their own ML risk score to reflect that they are indeed
Oh, no.
committing crimes. So I think there's also that reasons where for specific attributes, yes, the our data partners have the ability to update that score
Okay.
if anything changes.
Oh, that's nice. That's great. So it kind of increases the trackability and also increases your security. This brings us to another question that I had because you just mentioned the AML scoring and the AML risk scoring. It is an attribute that is required for the passport, right? So how and where is this AML score obtained from for the Quadrata passport?
Yeah, so I think first of all, the email risk score is not necessarily a requirement. I think a passport itself just means that a user have onboarded with one of the attributes. The way the email risk score is basically being collected and issued is that the user will basically work with one of our data partners who have the ability and the
Hmm.
know-how to basically screen a user's information against a list. And at the end of
Hmm.
that results, we screen basically both their off-chain information against a bunch of lists, and also we screen against their on-chain activities against a bunch of lists to detect where the source of funds are coming from. And at the end of this very
Okay.
process, there is an AML risk score 1 to 10 that basically is attached to the passports.
So in a way, we are aiming for a more safe space for the lending and borrowing, correct?
Yes, one of the primary goals is, yes, how do we basically make the space, the DeFi space or the Web3 space safer, attempting to solve that at least.
Well, with this, I would like to ask you about the future. So, where do you place the decentralized identity in the emerging DeFi world?
Right, I think the ideas are basically this key infrastructure in Web3 that I don't think has been solved yet. I think this is
Hmm.
something that a lot of people have tried in the past, maybe were too early. And I think today, the identity space, we start seeing that become more and more crowded, and rightfully so. I think the demand is also there today, and the demand is increasing as we speak.
You just said that there are a few problems that are still to be solved, right? So, are there any limitations in the metaverse that Quadrata aims to solve through DIDs or any other services that Quadrata is aiming for?
Yeah, I mean, I think compliance is one of it. I think the Sybil resistance in Web3 is something that is pretty
Hmm.
painful for a lot of companies. I think it doesn't just stop at DeFi. You see that a lot happening in
Yeah.
the Web3 gamings or NFT mints or anything that has financial
Hmm.
incentives, or you can think of in the future of concert tickets. How do we basically know that someone is unique? How do we detect real customers opposed to bots? I think that's something that, especially
Hmm.
potentially with AI, is going to be more and more important as one of the problematic to solve. How do we know that someone is a real user as opposed to an automated bot? The second use cases here is really, we're still ultimately trying to bring more and more real services on chain. And I think as we talk
Hmm.
about identity, obviously, and compliance, I think the third one that is critical is really going to be like, credentials and reputations. And that could be not only for DeFi, but we
Hmm.
can think about any applications that rely on some sort of reputations. I think we are used to it in the non on-chain world. Every applications that we use out there
Hmm.
rely on some sort of reputations. You go on Amazon, you're gonna shop because of the number of stars, number of reviews that an item has,
Hmm. Yeah.
and then you go on Airbnb, is gonna say the same thing. So we don't have that yet in Web3 because we need to solve
In the
first
Web3 world.
identity. But at some point, reputations,
Hmm.
credentials is hopefully going to be more and more prominent, and it's going to make product much better and the experience for users much better as
Yeah. That's true. That's very true. So, you were talking about the services from the off-chain world, right? Like, for example, currently decentralized finance is moving forward to bringing real-world assets onto the chain, and everyone is going crazy about it because they really want it. That will smoothen things, make it more efficient. So, talking about that, does Quadrata aspire to enhance or bring some other feature from the off-chain or any other feature in particular that you are aiming for into the DeFi world?
Yes, so we are not ourselves building today the financial services or bringing services, but I think today we had a chance to work with a decent amount of ecosystem partners, and I can tell you that a lot of those very smart people are trying to do exactly what you described, and that's the reason
Hmm.
why we are working with them because they need access also to our solutions to be able to offer and support those services in DeFi.
Yeah, so in a way, if those services of bringing RWA onto the chain, it's like a creeper or a climber, then Quadrata is like the support they need to move forward, isn't it?
It's likely one of the pieces that are necessary. I'm sure there's a lot more depending on which assets they're
Hmm.
bringing. But I think yes, when I have the chance to speak with those partners, clearly identity and compliance is one critical piece that.
That's great. With this, I would like to encapsulate the episode. We learned about what is decentralized identity, how that can be used to reduce the default rate in the blockchain world, and a very important factor that we can have passports on the blockchain. That's the most intriguing part. So this brings us to the end of my questions, and I think so we've gotten a lot of knowledge from you, and that's amazing. We did not know so much about decentralized identity and how can we have passports on blockchain? Well, now we can, and it was amazing having you with us. So thank you so much, Fab. It was wonderful talking to you. We got so much of information. I am enlightened myself. Oh, that's amazing. Thank you.
Thank you so much for receiving me, and thank you for the question as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening. And if you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to subscribe to Link to the Chain and share it with others. To catch all the latest from us, you can follow the official Instagram and Twitter page at Link to the Chain. Looking forward to sharing with you guys the next episode. Stay tuned.